Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the review session, February 18th, 2004. Jackie? 14, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Today's Tuesday, February 18th, and a quorum is present. The first item on the agenda is a proposed zoning map amendment from M11 to R5B, R6B, and R6B C13 to bring existing residential uses into conformance and to facilitate new construction in maps. Our presenter this afternoon is Tom. It's item number 1, page 1.
Good afternoon. 176 Woodward Owner LLC seeks the approval of a zoning map amendment to change zoning on portions of 3 blocks located in Maspeth, Western Queens, from M11 to R5B, R6B, and R6B C13. The project area is located in a transitional zone between residential uses in the south and manufacturing uses to the north, clustering along Newtown Creek, close to the Brooklyn-Queens border. The rezoning is intended to bring existing residential uses into conformance and to facilitate the construction of a 4-story mixed-use building on Site 1, this larger site, as well as a separate 4-story building on Site 2, the smaller site to the north of Woodward Avenue. The rezoning area is generally bounded by Woodward Avenue, Star Street, Onderdonk Ave, and Flushing Avenue. The proposed rezoning area contains 57 lots located within an M1 district. The majority of the lots are residential in use, with small row houses along this section of Charlotte Street and larger or smaller multifamily apartment buildings along Troutman Ave. Sites 1 and 2 are currently owned by the applicant. Site 1 has an area of 45,000 square feet, and Site 2 has an area of 5,500 square feet. While both properties are used for vehicle and open storage, a small portion of Site 1 is used by a stone building materials supplier. Site 1 also possesses certain unique characteristics. It's located on a site with a fairly significant grade change. The highest point in the area is below the cemetery, and everything slopes away from it towards the creek. So there's a significant grade change going down Woodward Avenue, as well as going down Star Street and down Troutman Street. The proposed rezoning area was previously included within the boundaries of the Maspeth Industrial Business Zone as part of a citywide process of modifying the boundaries of the IBZ. It was agreed upon by all concerned parties that this particular area is not a viable site for industrial use and should be removed from the IBZ. You can see where the original IBZ boundary was. It originally continued all the way down Star Street, but as part of the revision process, the boundary was notched inward into the IBZ to allow for this area to come out and be rezoned. On September 13th, 2013, the IBZ Boundary Commission voted to remove the area covered by the rezoning from the Maspeth IBZ. The 2 sites owned by the applicant are within the area that is proposed to be rezoned to R6B with a C13 commercial overlay. The applicant's primary focus is on developing Site 1, which you can see here and here. The applicant intends to develop a building of 3 to 4 stories on Site 1. The building will contain 80,000 square feet of residential space, which would account for about 88 residential units, with commercial and community facility space on the ground floor. Parking would be provided for 118 cars, both at the rear of the site, you can see here, as well as underground. Development Site 2 would likely consist of a 4-story development. At the outset of the application, the applicant was looking at just developing it with a purely residential building, but as part of the environmental review process, we also had them examine the opportunity of providing ground floor retail on the site. I just don't know my own strength.
Your 3 minutes is up, Thomas.
As I said earlier, the application proposes to rezone portions of an existing M11 district to R5B, R6B, and to establish a C13 commercial overlay. The action would facilitate the development of the two sites under the applicant's ownership and bring existing residential uses into conformance. And that's upside down. You can see illustrated here the existing zoning condition with an M1 district extending to the northwest, with existing R5B and R4 to the southeast. And R5...
Yeah.
Got it. An R5B district is proposed for a portion of one block that comprises the western section of the proposed rezoning area. The proposed R5B district would bring the existing residential uses into conformance and closely match the existing built conditions. R5B districts allow for all housing types with a maximum FAR of 1.35 and a maximum building height of 33 feet. Off-street group parking is required for 66% of dwelling units. R6B is proposed for portions of 3 blocks that comprise the eastern section of the rezoning area. While a considerable portion of the section is covered by the applicant's 2 intended development sites, the majority of the existing residential uses consist of 3-story multifamily apartment buildings, such as these on Troutman, which you can see here. The proposed R6B district would also bring existing residential uses into conformance and facilitate development on sites 1 and 2. R6B allows a maximum FAR for all development types of 2.0, and buildings are limited to a height of 50 feet with a base height ranging between 30 and 40 feet, after which a front setback is required. Parking must be provided for 50% of the dwelling units. Two C13 commercial overlays are proposed for the northern and southern block fronts of Woodward Avenue between Troutman and Star Street. C13 districts permit local commercial uses that generally serve the immediate neighborhood. Most retail uses in the district would require 1 accessory parking space per 400 square feet of commercial floor area. The preliminary drawings from the application have been shown to the community and has generally been fairly well received. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Questions? Erwin, and then
A couple of questions.
Angela Battaglia.
You said 50% parking?
Mm-hmm.
Is that 118 cars?
No, they're providing more parking than they have to.
Okay. Is there 1 elevator or 2 elevators in the building?
I believe there's 2. Where did that one go? Yeah, there's 2 elevator cores.
Okay. If one goes down, it's okay. There's access
Mm-hmm.
if one goes down.
Mhm.
Okay. And with 88 units and 80,000 square feet, those are rather small units, aren't they?
I believe some would be on the smaller size, but I would need to check into the exact breakdown.
No offer of affordable housing, right?
No, they had looked at that as being a possibility, and they still are looking at other programs which they could work through, but it wasn't going to work for the inclusionary housing. But they are exploring the option.
Angela.
I was happy that the manager of the Maspeth IBZ agreed that this is an appropriate site for housing. I believe it is, and I believe it's an appropriate site for commercial development as well. I know the area really well. I pass it every time I come here, and I grew up just blocks away. I just wonder, I think R5B is absolutely appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
R6B, I'm not too sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little tall for that area because the buildings are predominantly 3-story.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of 2-family homes further east,
Mm-hmm.
you I'm sure
Yes.
know.
Yes.
Wonderful views of the city, particularly with the the grade change. And I just wonder why that the R6B and R5B wouldn't be reversed because of that grade change. It doesn't make that much sense to me, Tom.
Okay.
I think R5B is more appropriate. I do like the design of the building. I would like to see 88 units there. I think it's really a good use. It would be welcome in that particular area. I question, along with my colleague, 88 units on that site. Are they all one-bedroom units? I like to see family units, even if they are going to be markets. At least you then draw from the nearby community. And that area, although some of it is industrial, the part of it that is residential, they are families. So those are my concerns.
Okay. I'll try to address that. Really, when we were looking at an appropriate district for the main site, the R6B was kind of guided by how wide Woodward Avenue is. We do have some of the larger 3-story apartment buildings. They're actually fairly deep, so they're dense. They're a very deep building. So the R6B...
They're not tall.
They're not tall. They're not tall.
I'm questioning the height.
Yes. But in terms of FAR, it is a close match. But I understand your concern about the height. But for the site in particular, because of the significant grade changes, you really only get the 4-story effect right on the corners of the properties themselves. Really, in the mid-blocks and past it, you only really get a 3-story building. So you get 3 down the side streets, and really in the middle of Woodward Avenue, you only really get a 3-story building. It's only on the corners that you would really get the full 4-story effect.
And I would suspect probably this is a private application, so...
I understand that.
So we'll also have an opportunity during public hearings to hear the applicant respond.
I just wanted to raise just the questions, really.
Sure.
Other questions? Anna?
Tom, I was hoping you could elaborate on why inclusionary housing wouldn't work here, although it heads in the opposite direction of Commissioner Battaglia's question. And my second question is there a chosen community facility space user yet?
I'll start with the first one, or the second one. They have been speaking with various community groups. I believe the last iteration was possibly an arts group. Yeah. Possibly arts workspace or gallery space. But I believe, that still has to be finalized. As for the inclusionary housing, for an R6B district, it's, there isn't quite enough density to allow for the inclusionary housing program really to produce anything. So we had examined that, but we most likely would have had to go higher to get that program.
So that's essentially a flaw in the inclusionary housing program. I mean, it's a comment related to inclusionary housing in R6B districts in general, not specific to this site.
On the voluntary nature.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Michelle?
Tom, thanks for walking us through. I had some of the same questions about the affordable housing component, but I guess, can you maybe walk us through how the decision was made to draw the boundaries? Because I'm just wondering, for instance, why that little triangular piece was excluded, and maybe it's about the uses.
Right here?
Yeah.
It is about the uses. Those are still active industrial commercial uses. I believe this is an auto parts dealership, and this has some active manufacturing and warehousing on the site. So that's why this area was pulled out. The R5B was picked, and this boundary drawn because it most closely matched both the form of the buildings on Charlotte Street and the density of these buildings on Woodward. And the R6B, though it allows for a little more height, these buildings are especially deep. So in terms of FAR, the R6B was a very good match. And these buildings here on north of Woodward Ave.
Thank you.
Erwin?
With regard to that manufacturing building,
Yes.
what does it manufacture? Do we know?
I did at one point. I will have to check.
Is it noisy?
No, it's mostly warehousing. I'd have to check on exactly what is in that building. I know there's a warehousing component.
It's M11, it's light.
It's M11, yeah, exactly.
Other questions? Other questions for Tom? Okay, this is certified. We'll see it again.
Thanks, Tom. Let's now move to item number 2, page 17, proposed zoning text amendment and zoning map amendments to facilitate the redevelopment of privately owned property used for public parking to a mixed-use building in Hunters Point, Queens. Our presenter this afternoon is John. This is item number 2, page 17.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm presenting on behalf of Penny Lee, the project manager and planner in this part of Queens. I'm really pleased to be here, though, to see you all. This is an application that's seeking zoning text and zoning map amendments submitted by Hunters Point 49 LLC, and it's going to facilitate a mixed-use development that's proposed for the northwest corner of 49th Avenue and 21st Street at the eastern edge of the Hunters Point neighborhood in Long Island City. As you're probably aware, this part of Long Island City has had long possessed a mix of residential, commercial, and light industrial uses, and it was rezoned in 2004 through an agency-sponsored rezoning to direct the evolution of mixed-use development in the area, particularly to reinforce existing development patterns and support transit-oriented development. The site itself is currently used as a public parking lot containing 100 spaces and 70 bike parking spaces, and it adjoins, as you can see here in this picture, the Sunnyside Yards at their western edge. The yards really extend much further to the east and west, to the west, to the east, to the west. The tracks go through a viaduct and then go underground and eventually under the river. The immediately surrounding uses have shown the redevelopment of the area since 2004. There's a 12-story apartment building immediately to the west, as well as one on the southwest portion of the block across the street. And directly to the north of the property is a 10-story commercial office building on 21st Street. Transit access is really convenient to the site. Just across 21st Street are entrances to the number 7 train Hunters Point stop, and to the north on 21st Street and Jackson Avenue our stop is a station for the G train. The proposal would facilitate a 140-unit development by extending the existing M15 R7X to fill out the rezoning pattern on the block. And there would also be text amendments that would adapt and establish the special Long Island City mixed-use district here and the provisions of the Hunters Point sub-district. Again, the zoning changes are to extend the M15 R7X to fill out the block's zoning pattern and to establish the special Long Island City mixed-use district and the Hunters Point sub-district. The resulting development would be an 8 to 12-story building, matching the scale of development, as I say, just to the west, and the ground floor would contain a mixture of retail spaces, of approximately 6,100 square feet of retail space, lobby space, and community rooms for the residents. Below grade, there would be 100 accessory parking spaces, and there'd be a total of 110 bicycle parking spaces on 2 levels, the ground floor and the cellar level of the building. Last year, you might remember, we adopted special provisions to allow sidewalk cafes in the special Long Island City mixed-use district, and this development would seek to have a text amendment that would allow the sidewalk cafes, unenclosed sidewalk cafes, along this portion of 49th Avenue between Jackson Avenue and 21st Street. Thank
Done?
you.
Okay, thank you, John. Questions? Betty?
John. It looks like the site kind of narrows as it gets to the east, and one of the plans we have shows that it's about 35 feet wide at the easternmost side. So I was just wondering if you have elevations of the north side of the building. I'm just wondering if there seem to be a lot of windows on the southern side, but I'm wondering if it's a single or double loaded corridor as you get up to the upper levels, and whether you have windows on the northern.
We do have elevations. Unfortunately, they're not here, but there are windows facing 21st Street. There is a double-loaded corridor, but it doesn't extend all the way to the end. So at the easternmost end, it does become single-loaded.
Okay, and then, so is there a blank wall as you get towards the narrower side of the site? Or?
No, and again, we'll have that when this comes back. But there are windows fronting the full corner here, both on 21st Street and 49th Avenue.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Other questions? Michelle?
Hi, John. Thanks for being here to present for Penny. So there's no mention of any affordable housing, so I guess that means that it's not planned for the site.
421A.
421.
I missed.
There are 421A tax credits that the development company said they're going to be using here. The 421A program in this part of the city requires on-site affordable housing, so there would be at least 20% affordable units with the development, and the developer has a strong track record of using affordable housing programs with their projects. They've developed about 1,700 units so far, and all but 100 of those have really utilized a variety of affordable housing programs.
Great. Thanks for correcting that. I must have confused it with another proposal. So maybe you recall this, since you were probably here. What was the thinking earlier as to why that area was excluded?
I've been thinking about that for this presentation, and the best that I can recall was that there was an existing boundary already between the Jackson Avenue frontage of this block and this particular corner, and we simply utilized that existing boundary already in place. And, logically, this makes a much more complete treatment of the whole block.
Irwin?
John, is this job within a floodplain?
No, it's definitely above the existing 100-year floodplain and even the working maps. Mm-hmm.
It's above the working.
Yes.
Other questions? This is certified. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Let's now move to item number 3, page 36, proposed urban development action area project designation, project approval, disposition of city-owned property, and a special permit to facilitate a mixed-use building containing affordable housing in Community District 16, Brooklyn. Our presenter is Corin. That's item number 3, page 36.
Good afternoon. This is an application by HPD for an Urban Development Action Area designation, project approval, and the disposition of city-owned property, as well as a special permit to facilitate the development of 79 units of supportive and affordable housing in the Ocean Hill section of Brooklyn, Community District 16. The proposed development site is located along the southern block of Broadway and consists of 7 vacant city-owned lots, totaling about 20,000 square feet in an R6 C13 district. In 2005, HPD submitted a ULURP application for UDAP and disposition approvals associated with a commercial development that was proposed for this site that would consist of a non-residential building with approximately 17,000 square feet of retail space. This application was approved, however, the development never went forward and the project area remains under city ownership. The surrounding area consists of commercial and institutional uses along major corridors with mid to low-rise residential uses on the side streets and mid-block areas. The land uses along the Broadway corridor are largely commercial and institutional, with scattered community facility uses. Most of the surrounding area falls into an R6 and R6B district, with C13 and C23 commercial overlays along Broadway and south along Rockaway Avenue. The project area is well served by public transportation, with the elevated J and Z lines running along Broadway, and the Chauncey Street station located just about a half block south of the project site. Broadway is also served by numerous bus lines. The proposed development would consist of a 6-story mixed-use building with supportive and affordable housing. It is proposed to contain 79 supportive and affordable units. 60% of the units would be designated for chronically homeless individuals with severe and persistent mental illness, and 40% of the units would be affordable to individuals and families earning less than 60% of the area median income. Supportive services would be available on-site to all tenants and would include case management, recovery programs, and 24-hour building security. The building would have a street wall and total height of approximately 60 feet. The building will contain a mix of studios, 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units on the 1st through 6th floors. In addition to the supportive and affordable housing units, there will be commercial space on the ground floor along Broadway. The total floor area of the building would be 68,000 square feet, including about 4,800 square feet of commercial space and 63,000 square feet of community facility space. There will be 3,800 square feet of outdoor recreation space at the rear of the building. The proposed development would require less than 25 accessory parking spaces, and the parking requirements have been waived. No on-site parking will be provided. In addition to the proposed development, a privately owned site located directly across Decatur Street will be developed concurrently as affordable and supportive housing. This site will also include supportive and affordable housing with commercial space at the ground floor. However, this is a privately owned site and not subject to any land use review actions. To facilitate this project, the applicant has requested 2 actions: Urban Development Action Area designation, project approval and disposition, as well as a special permit pursuant to Zoning Resolution 74-902, which will allow increased FAR for a community facility with sleeping accommodations in Use Group 3. Approval of this special permit would allow an FAR of up to 4.8 for a community facility. Current zoning in this district allows up to 2.43 for Use Group 3 uses, and is the total for the zoning lot. The proposed building would have a community facility FAR of 3.13 and a total FAR of 3.35. Sorry. As well, a mayoral override has been approved to permit the proposed 6-story building with floor-to-ceiling heights of approximately 9.7 feet per floor, and therefore accommodate the number of planned affordable housing and supportive housing units on this site. The project site lies within an R6 C13 district, which restricts the street height for a community facility building to 60 feet or 4 stories, whichever is less. The proposed project height is within the allowable height limit of 60 feet for this district, and the mayoral override will permit them to develop 6 stories within this building envelope. Approval of these actions will facilitate the development of 79 units of supportive and affordable housing, as well as commercial space in the Ocean Hill district of Brooklyn Community District 16. Thank you.
All right. Questions? Angela?
Just
Irwin,
a
and then
comment, I
Michelle.
want to say that I also drive past this area a lot, and I think this will be a welcome addition to that area. I drive all over the place. So yeah, I think it's good. We'll get to see what the community comes back with. But I did want to ask you, what specific type of supportive housing is this slated for?
It will be individuals who've been chronically homeless, most with severe and persistent mental illness.
Okay, thank you.
And they did meet with the community board when they were developing the plans for the site, and the affordable housing units, they specifically requested a number of 2- and 3-bedroom units, which
I
they
was happy to see
incorporated
that.
into the plans for the building.
Irwin?
Did you say the floor height was 9.7?
I'm sorry, floor to ceiling heights were 9 feet 7 inches.
And floor to floor is 10.7.
I'm sorry. I can look at
It says it in here. Hang on.
It says 58 total.
I'm not sure
Floor
if I
to
have the
ceiling.
elevations with the specific floor to ceiling heights here.
Probably floor to floor.
And the other question I have, is that rendering a placeholder, assuming that some warmth and articulation will come into the final design?
This is the rendering that was provided by the architects. This is the building plan as of now.
Is anybody listening?
Amanda would be proud of you.
Yeah, but I can find out about the floor to ceiling heights. That's precise. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Floor to floor.
Yeah, floor to floor. Michelle and then Anna.
Do you happen to know whether or not the 1-, 2-, and 3-bedroom units would also be supportive for formerly homeless folks with serious and persistent mental illness, or is it just the studio units that are for the formerly homeless?
The studios and a number of the 1-bedrooms will be supportive housing units. The affordable will be 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms.
Okay, great. And has there been a social service provider identified yet for the project?
I believe they're working with services for the underserved, SUS.
Okay, thanks.
Anna?
Yes, thank you. I have a couple of questions. One is this is relatively large, especially when combined with the additional project across the street in terms of quantity of supportive housing, which Lord knows the city needs. But concentrations are always an issue. So when this comes back for the public hearing, it would be helpful if you could bring us a map showing other supportive housing in the area. That helps put things in context. And then I have a couple of land use or sort of building design questions. One is about having this front on the subway. The elevated track really runs sort of at the top of the second floor windows, in other words, the first layer of residential windows. And so my question is what the quality of life is going to be for residents overlooking or underlooking the subway. And the other is about the decision to put the building entrance at the rear through the Muse thing rather than bringing the activity of residents coming and going to the front side of the Broadway side of the building.
Right. In terms of the elevated train, I know they will be using double pane windows to attenuate noise and vibration from the subway, so I know that's been incorporated into the building design. And then in terms of the rear entry, I think it was to maximize commercial space on Broadway, but I can find out from the developer what the thinking was.
You mean Jerome Avenue?
The entrance?
Is that Broadway?
No, on Broadway.
Oh, okay.
Brockway.
Okay.
At the rear of the building.
Okay.
Oh, right, Broadway, okay.
Can I just follow up on that?
Good.
just to that point, I mean, we've seen recently the Dunn development in, I want to say Cypress Hills, which had a similar situation, and then Dunn development also did a project on Atlantic Avenue that's very, very close to the elevated train. So it may be, I know these folks speak to one another, and I know they're in the audience, so it might be helpful to just do some information sharing about some of the noise attenuation that was done in those projects, specific to this project as well.
Yeah, definitely needs best practices on.
That's true. We are seeing that more and more. It's true.
Orlando?
Well, historically, they have to build up to the train station because of the designation and the noise. I'm certain that the environmental impact statement will have in here the recipe for the sound attenuation for that wall, be it double glazed, be it triple glazed windows, whatever needs to happen. I just think that it would be sort of imperative that we share with the group so we can better understand how they plan to mitigate the noise and sound. The other question that I have is I see that you have air conditioner sleeves. They seem like sleeves on these elevations, which kind of dictate to have an air conditioner in there because part of the sound attenuation measure is to have an air conditioner running in the event you can't open your window, air conditioner heater. So I'd like to know a little bit more about how those air conditioner sleeves are going to be treated, whether the air conditioner units are going to be supplied, are they P-tax, and again, the sound attenuation assembly of the wall facing onto Broadway. I was one of the original proponents of the anchor program, and I worked on it when I was at the partnership. I happen to think that this is a better use for that site and for all the sites along Broadway. We grappled with the fact that at that point, no one wanted to build along the subway because of the sound attenuation and the cost that the developer incurs. Contrary to what my colleague is saying about the entrance, I happen to think that it's better at the back. It creates more of a community feel. Broadway is very hustling and bustling, and there's just so much activity. It doesn't present itself as a residential, entrance, and it doesn't welcome. I happen to think that's putting it in the back and making that courtyard really attractive makes a lot of sense.
Different ways to handle that.
I mean, there's certainly you're turning your back to the street. I understand that. But we're also fronting the street with retail, which is what is active on the Broadway corridor and what the anchor program had facilitated to try and develop at that time. So.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll definitely get more information on the how they're mitigating the noise from the subway when this returns.
Okay, other questions for Corin, right? Questions?
I just have to make a point. I find it, being a mother of a toddler, I find it funny that the garden is children's garden / meditative garden. I don't know if those two things go together.
They might have to choose one or the other.
Either or, right?
They create the need for you to meditate.
I'll bring that feedback back to the architect.
Okay.
One thought, please. How far is this from the station?
From subway?
No, yeah, from the entrance to the station.
About half a block. In fact, the northernmost point of the station is quite close to the development, but the development does not front on the subway station.
But you will get the screeching of the trains stopping.
That noise might be heard at this site, yes, and I will definitely get more information on how that will be mitigated.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, there's a number of questions raised, which I trust will be conveyed to the applicant.
Yeah.
And this is certified.
Thank you.
Thanks, Corin. Let's now move to item number 4, page 66, proposed disposition of vacant city-owned property, formerly assigned to the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, located in the Highbridge neighborhood of the Bronx. That's item number 4, page 66, and our presenter is Paul.
Just get ready. Just get ready.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is an application by the Department of Citywide Administrative Services. They're seeking general disposition approval pursuant to zoning for Block 2856, Lot 51 in the Bronx and Community District 4. While there are no facilitated projects associated with the property disposition, the approval will allow the city to dispose of the property in the future. Lot 2856, which you can see here in the photograph, is a 6,516 square foot lot, which is located on the west side of Jerome Avenue, between Clark Place and West 170th Street. The property currently includes a one-story, 6,250 square foot commercial building, which was constructed in 1920. The property was privately owned until 1981, when the city acquired the property through the MREM tax foreclosure process. It was assigned to the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene in 1982, which used it as a pest control facility. In August of 2013, the Department of Mental Hygiene vacated the property, and in December of 3rd, 2013, they surrendered the property to the Department of Citywide Administrative Services. The property is currently located, it's a split lot, it's currently located between an M12 and an R8C24 zoning district. Predominantly, it's located in the R8C24 district. R8 districts typically produce buildings that are 8 to 10 stories. Residential FARs can range up to 6.2. If developed pursuant to quality housing, you may go up to a maximum permitted FAR of 7.2. M12 zoning districts permit light industrial uses, wholesale services, and storage facilities, and they have a maximum FAR of 2.0. Surrounding uses in the area, primarily in the immediate area, primarily light industrial and commercial. There are many 1- and 2-story commercial buildings, many auto-related uses in this immediate area, as well as parking facilities. Both to the east and west, there's a strong residential character in those areas, but this immediate area. There's also a C83 district, which is mapped to the north of this site, as well as another C83 mapped to the south of the site. The subway is close proximity. There's a stop right here at the corner of East 170th Street, the number 4 elevated train.
Thank you, Paul. Questions? Angela?
Well, I'm just curious. On the maps that we have here, there's a big square box around Lot 48. Is there a reason for that?
Big square.
When I first looked at it, I thought it was I saw that it was Lot 51.
Page
I'm on
68.
page 68.
Oh, that's a function of the digital tax maps. When they print them out and they actually use them, those boxes typically come out. It has nothing to do with the actual development, sort of a function of the technology, if you will.
Okay.
The actual site is
Is outlined
I was
in
just
red.
wondering, because even on page 69, it seems to stand out. Thank you.
No problem.
Other questions for Paul? This is certified. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Let's now move to item number 5, page 72, proposed City Planning Commission certification regarding whether a transit easement is required or not on a zoning lot located at 237 East 34th Street. That's item number 5, page 72, back from Community Board Review. Our presenter is Dominic.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair, Commissioners. A special transit land use district is located at various intersections along 2nd Avenue, and the district was established to facilitate the eventual development of the 2nd Avenue subway. This application involves a portion of that transit land use district which is located between East 35th Street and East 33rd Street along 2nd Avenue. The administrative approval process for this transit land use district is two-step, and it's according to Section 95.041. First, a determination is made by the New York City Transit Authority and the City Planning Commission as to whether or not a transit easement volume for subway construction is required. Secondly, if a volume is required, a final certification is made on the specific easement volume. The subject zoning lot, 237-243, is a regularly shaped lot of about 7,300 square feet. It's located here. It consists of 2 tax lots. That's lot 26 and 23. That's on the north side of East 34th Street between 2nd Avenue and 3rd Avenue. The lot is zoned C19A, which permits 10 FAR residential and 2 of commercial. Currently, the zoning lot has a 4-story, 7,000 square foot building here on lot 26, which is a study house used for office. And here on lot 23 is an approximately 17,000 square foot building, which is a theater on lot 23. The entire zoning lot falls within the transit land use district. So what the applicant proposes to do is they propose to enlarge the theater into a 70,000 square foot mixed-use building with 4,000 square feet of commercial on the ground floor and 79 units, residential units above. The office building, Estonia House, would not be touched. That would remain as is. And just to reiterate, the section requires the TA and the commission to certify as to whether or not the easement is required on the zoning lot. So in a letter which is in your packages dated February 10th, the New York City Transit Authority certified to the Department of City Planning that a transit easement volume is not required on this particular zoning lot. The department concurs with the TA's determination that the easement volume is not required. On December 16th, Community Board 6, in a letter to the Department of City Planning, by a vote of 37-1, expressed that they support this application. And if there are any questions.
Any questions for Dominic? If there is not, then we need to express our concurrence with a show of hands that would then send this to the Department of Buildings. Concurrence, everyone? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Why can't this be a chair cert rather than a commission cert? Because, if we can cite a school without having to ask the commission about it, it seems to me we ought to be able to take Transit Authority's word that they don't need a subway. Never mind. It's always nice to see Dominic.
Thank you.
But I'm just saying, right?
Dominic probably has better things to do with his time.
Actually, probably the next time we have a review session, you'll see me again with one of these. So it's coming through the pipe.
You're getting good at it.
Thank you, Commissioners. Now let's move to item number 6, page 80, proposed modification of a special permit to facilitate improvements to an existing through-block arcade located at 57-63 East 52nd Street, Acton Community Board Review, and our presenter is Frank. That's item number 6, page 80.
This one has a piano. This one had a piano. I obviously don't go to enough things. See, there's a piano. Look at that.
So this is an application made on behalf of Park Avenue Plaza Owner LLC for a modification to a previously granted special permit for a through-block arcade on the ground floor of the 42-story commercial building known as Park Avenue Plaza. So Park Avenue Plaza was approved by the Commission as a through-block arcade in the late 70s, early 80s, and was constructed pursuant to that original approval and hasn't been modified since that original approval. The proposal updates the existing site plan for the through-block arcade in an attempt to modernize it and bring it up to more contemporary standards. Some of the big moves are taking some of what today are a series of 2 kiosks in the space, turning it into a single space on one edge, maintaining the overall seating, but providing a greater sense of division between the through-block portion of the space and the overall seating portion through a series of overall glass columns. The modification was referred out to the community board, and the community board approved of the modification.
Okay. So, Jackie, this also goes to...
Send a letter to the building department assuming that condition is...
All righty. Of course.
Not going to prevent me from sticking my hand up when the moment comes.
Okay.
I neglected to ask when this was referred out about Wi-Fi access, because this is one of those interior spaces where people hang out and poke at their devices. And we had another case where the developer voluntarily agreed to provide free Wi-Fi access in an arcade or public space like this. It sure would be nice if it could be here, although I realize it's totally voluntary.
I can find out and see what we can do.
I have a similar funny question.
Okay.
Is the piano going? Is the piano going to continue to be used, or not so much?
Yeah, the piano, I believe, will be maintained as part of the space.
Maybe you can put the hotspot in the
Is
piano.
Is that a condition
Yes.
of your concurrence that the piano be maintained? Okay, by a show of hands, can we send this to the Department of Buildings? Thank you, Frank.
Thanks, Frank. Let's now move to item number 7. It's a Manhattan pre-hearing application with respect to a proposed notice of intent to acquire office space to facilitate offices for the Human Resource Administration to be located at 123 William Street. Our presenter is Richard. There you are. That's item number 7, page 126, a Manhattan pre-hearing item.
Morning.
Afternoon.
Afternoon. Oh. Sorry. So sorry. This is a notice of intent by the Department of Citywide Administrative Services to acquire approximately 17,000 square feet of office space at 123 William Street in Lower Manhattan for use by the Human Resources Administration's Business Link program. Business Link functions as an employment service for HRA clients who receive cash assistance or housing subsidies, matching clients with potential employers and providing screening and testing services. The program formerly occupied 15,000 square feet of office space at 348 West 34th Street between 8th and 9th Avenues and shared a lease with the NYPD. That lease is being terminated and the police department has already relocated from that site. The relocation of the Business Link program was cited in the citywide Statement of Needs for city facilities in 2013 and 2014 with the citing criterion of access to transportation. 123 William Street is a 26-story, 500,000 square foot commercial office tower on William Street between Fulton and John Streets in Lower Manhattan. This is the site here, outlined in black. This is Fulton Street, this is John Street, and William Street right here. Just to the east, down here would be the South Street Seaport, Wall Street further down, and City Hall Park right up here. There's also another look at the building highlighted here. There's our 8th Spruce Street, and then City Hall Park right there. The building is located in a C64 zoning district in the special Lower Manhattan district, and it's in a predominantly commercial area, with most, if not all, buildings with ground floor retail. But the area has become increasingly residential, with some new residential construction in and around Fulton Street, and a number of conversions down on Wall Street. City Hall Park, again, is up to the northeast of the site within walking distance, and the East River Esplanade would be in the South Street Seaport down here to the east. The site is also well served by transportation with immediate access to the 2-3 trains, as well as access to the 4-5 AC, J, and Z trains at the Fulton Transit Center. This map shows the location of all the subway entrances with the Fulton Transit Center right there. The site is also accessible from the Staten Island Ferry at Whitehall Terminal and from the ferry serving Pier 11 at Wall Street. The building is currently fully commercial with the cafe on the ground floor. And other tenants include the Social Security Administration, the Urban Justice League, New York State Division of Licensing Services, and other divisions of the New York Department of State. HRA intends to occupy the majority of the 6th floor of 123 William Street, which is currently vacant and gutted. The program currently has a staff of approximately 50 and serves 60 clients and 5 to 10 potential employers a day at its current location. With the relocation, HR will maintain the staff of 50, but intends or expects to serve up to 80 clients a day at the new site. Most of the reporting will take place during normal business hours, or between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. on weekdays, but staff will have 24/7 access to the building. As I mentioned, the citing criterion for the Business Link program was access to transportation, and with direct access to the 2, 3, 4, 5, AC, J, and Z trains, as well as the E and R later with the completion of the Fulton Transit Center, as also with ferry access at Pier 11 and Staten Island Ferry, the area is very rich in transportation. The new space will be a sufficient size to meet the needs of the Business Link program and will be renovated and designed to meet the needs of HRA. The facility will also be fully accessible. On December 5th, the Financial District Committee of Community Board 1 met to discuss the application, having met with representatives from both DCAS and HRA. The committee, by a vote of 10-0 with 0 abstentions, recommended approval of the application, but urges the Commission to ask DCAS to consider the residential growing population when relocating facilities to Lower Manhattan. As you know, the acquisition is reviewed in consideration of 4 fair share criteria listed in the Notice of Intent in your packages. The Community Board does not think that these are sufficient in the siting of facilities in Lower Manhattan. I have representatives from both DCAS, HRA, and Community Board 1 at the meeting tomorrow. Thanks.
Okay, Betty?
Could you maybe expand a little bit on the community board? I know they voted 10-0 in favor. But then in our materials in the resolution, it said that they felt the city hadn't taken into consideration the impact of the relocation on the growing residential population, but this is an existing commercial office building right over, many subway lines, commercial office on both sides of the street. So is it sort of a philosophical complaint about sort of the mixture of residential and commercial?
I think it's...
Or is it about this particular application?
My understanding is I had a conversation with the community board. They're not opposed to this relocation and HRA locating at 123 William Street. They recognize that this is a commercial area. I believe they have a larger issue with the process and how these facilities are set down here. And when considering locating into Lower Manhattan, they feel that the area has become much more residential and that when relocating, perhaps the board should be involved in more conversations when dealing with this, perhaps the clientele that may come down and how it may mesh with the residential population down here. So I think it's a larger process question, but this application itself they have no issue with.
Okay, thank you.
Maria, and then Anna.
Just a question. The committee, one committee voted and voted 10 people in the committee, but it didn't go to the full board. Is there any reason why it happened?
Yes, the charter requires that this process be locked into a 30-day process from the date of filing to when the commission makes a decision. So what we have typically done is we have asked the DCAS and the relevant agency to meet with the community board to just have a conversation and really talk out any issues and perhaps try to address that before reaching the commission. So normally 30 days would not be enough time for I believe many community boards to receive the proposal, review it, bring it to the relevant smaller committee, and then have it go to a full board and then send a resolution to the commission. So they had enough time to discuss at the committee level. They voted that, and then they will bring this to the full board on the 25th of this month, and we may receive the final resolution, but the text wouldn't change, and I think this is more for them to officially have on their record, a decision and stance on this.
Okay, thanks.
Anna.
So more about that. I understand that the committee voted in favor of this resolution, but this resolution doesn't take a position on this application.
I noticed that, and that's why I had a conversation with them. They just clarified over the phone that they're not disapproving this application.
Okay. It would be helpful if the full board is going to send us.
Yes, and the board will be here tomorrow.
Okay, but if they're going to send us a full recommendation or after meeting at the full board, it would be helpful if that included a yes or no, rather than just a suggestion for the future.
Yeah, and again, someone will be here tomorrow, so I'm sure he or she will consider that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on this? This is on for public hearing.
Thanks, Richard. Let's now move to item number 8, page 136, proposed special permit, city map amendment, city planning commission certifications, and modification to previously approved authorization to facilitate the expansion of Rockefeller University. Back from community board. Thank you. Our presenter is Melissa.
Good afternoon. Did you go? No.
It's a lot of extensions. Did you get a chance to go on the tour? I plan to go there. I know there was one that did happen, right? I'm not sure.
All right. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Rockefeller University is proposing several actions: a city map change, special permits to build over the FDR Drive, modifications of bulk, modification to the existing large-scale community facility development, and approvals pursuant to a 1973 agreement with the city and the university. The actions are requested in order to facilitate the development of a state-of-the-art research laboratory facility within the Rockefeller University campus and over the FDR Drive. The project site is located in the Upper East Side, Manhattan Community District 8. Rockefeller University is located between 62nd Streets and 68th Streets, between York Avenue and the FDR Drive, within the academic and medical corridor in the Upper East Side, generally situated along York Avenue. Neighboring institutions include Memorial Sloan Kettering, New York Hospital, Weill Cornell Hospitals for Special Surgery. The site is predominantly zoned R10 and R9. Institutions along the FDR Drive have been able to build over the FDR pursuant to a 1973 agreement and approval from the City Planning Commission. The orange indicates buildings developed above the drive, which the drive is indicated in purple. Buildings were constructed by Rockefeller University, New York Hospital, and the Hospital for Special Surgery. The agreement anticipated the needs of the institutions and was crafted to favor institutional development away from the residential communities along and west of York Avenue. It also provided for waterfront public improvements and access ramps to the Esplanade. Additionally, laid out a process for demapping portions of the FDR Drive that would be used for the structural support columns in connection with the institutional build-overs. Specific to the 1973 agreement on the Rockefeller University campus, 2 buildings, and these are shown in orange, have been built over the FDR Drive. The southern building is a 36-story staff housing building constructed in 1983, and the northern building is a 15-story research facility built in 89. Additionally, there was a pedestrian bridge that was built in 1998. The Rockefeller University project area contains 605,000 square feet, or nearly 13.9 acres. Campus includes research labs, administrative and support facilities, and dormitories within a secure, gated perimeter. Its main entrance is at 66th Street and York Avenue. With respect to Rockefeller's history of development, the university was founded in 1901 to foster scientific and biomedical research. Its earliest buildings were built between 1905 and 1915 along the FDR Drive. In the 60s, additional buildings were also added closer to York Avenue around the renowned modernist design landscape area by Dan Kiley. In 1989, the CPC approved a 15-story Rockefeller Research Building, a lab building, and some smaller modernizations were done in 2007. However, no new laboratory buildings have been built since 1989, and the campus's current buildings, which are vertical and have narrow floor plates, did not anticipate the spatial flexibility needed for today's modern laboratory layouts. So Rockefeller University proposes to build a new structure that would create modern biomedical research space to retain its top researchers and faculty. The building would be a low-scale, continuous horizontal structure that maximizes the number of laboratories on a single floor and accommodates for future changes in layout. The area identified for such a facility is over the FDR Drive and close to existing facilities. While Rockefeller is proposing a new building, it would not increase its population. This is the proposed site plan. The project would add two floors of modern laboratory spaces with a rooftop pavilion, an interactive conference center, and a fitness center. Like prior developments within the campus, it would be built away from York Avenue being here, and the new development here. The site plan would extend the green space from the eastern edge towards the FDR Drive, taking advantage of a sloped site condition. And this is actually a section through the campus, with East River being here and York Avenue right here. And you can see how the campus gradually slopes up from York Avenue towards the FDR, and actually the landscaping area is constructed over the build-over, or above the building, the new build-over. In terms of the proposed program, the expansion would provide 141 square feet of research space, It's 90% of the proposed uses. Other uses include, common space for the labs, cafeteria, an interactive conference center, and a fitness center. This is a plan of the FDR level. To build the new facility over demapped airspace of the FDR, structural support columns would be needed to be placed along both sides of the FDR, 20 along the west side of the FDR and 10 along the east side. Part of the project would include a 5-foot-high noise barrier along the eastern edge of the drive extending from an FDR crash wall. This is an example of the structural Y column, which is designed as a Y in order to minimize column placement on the esplanade. These are proposed along the east side of the drive, flush with the crash wall. There are 8 that are proposed. The Y column dimensions are 3 foot 6 deep to a maximum height of 46.3. It would be 6 feet at the base. It would flange out to about 48 feet. There are also 2 oval columns to the north of this along the site. They would be 3 foot 6 deep. They would rise to a height of about 20 feet and would be 10 feet wide. This is the first floor plan. The length of the structural span built over the demapped volume would be 960 feet, and the span would include a new lab facility and interactive conference center. The continuous lab building, which is 86 feet deep and 750 feet long, would allow for a large open floor plate, flexible layout, and common shared space. The interactive conference center, located to the north, would be 98 feet deep and 178 feet long, would contain outdoor space on its north terrace. The 3,400 square foot conference center would be an integral part of Rockefeller's program, allow for the university to have on-site retreat and conference space. It would also relocate those uses from the president's office. This is the second floor plan, and the second level of the lab floor provides, again, for an open, flexible floor plate. The span of the building reduces to approximately 700 feet, maintaining a typical depth of 96 feet. This is the roof plan of the research building. There are 2 pavilions, an office and cafeteria pavilion. The roof would also provide an open-air amphitheater with significant landscaping surrounding it, would serve as a linear extension of the campus landscaping and bringing that landscaping to the edge, the eastern edge. The roof would also be directly accessible from the campus ground. This is an elevation of the building. The west elevation here shows that the proposed structure actually is not visible, and that's because of the gradual incline of the campus towards the east. And the east elevation from the East River shows that its design of the new structure is actually physically and visually connects the campus overall. And unlike other structures built over the drive that are vertical, the proposed structure is actually low-rise. This is a detailed elevation of the Y columns, which would be located 96 feet from center to center. The oval columns would be 80 feet apart. These Y columns, again, are intended to limit the amount of structure that's placed on the esplanade and preserve the open space. Just give you a sense of some renderings shown here, perspective from the East River, closer to the roof of the lab and also the esplanade, and the entrance at 66th and York. This is the fitness center plan, which is at the corner of 68th Street and York Avenue. It's currently, the existing plan here, currently has a covered parking structure and tennis court, and the proposed project would replace 45 on-site parking spaces with a approximately 15,000 square foot fitness center with an indoor swimming pool, tennis court on the roof. Here are just some renderings of what that proposed fitness center building would look like at the corner of 68th and York. Coming to the enhancements to the esplanade. In addition to building over the FDR Drive, which is noted here in yellow, Rockefeller University is proposing to enhance a section of the existing esplanade along the project area. The aerial shows the future location of Andrew Haswell Playground, which is shown as a rendering to the south. And Parks has actually assessed this portion of the seawall here and determined that is in need of repairs. Rockefeller University is proposing to repair this existing seawall, approximately 1,200 linear feet of it, And at the same time, it will enhance the esplanade, 33,000 square feet of existing esplanade. So it also address environmental mitigation. The enhanced esplanade is located next to the affected project area from 63rd Street to 68th Street. The key reconfiguration of the esplanade includes a 12-foot wide bicycle and pedestrian lane throughout its entire length, 4 feet for pedestrians, 8 feet for bikes, and these would be separated lanes. Overall, in terms of amenities, Rockefeller will increase the total number of trees, provide new and varied seating arrangements, increase planted area to contain plant materials that can withstand flooding and require minimal irrigation, drinking fountains, and an irrigation system, as well as a 5-foot-high sound barrier along the length of the enhanced esplanade. Here are just some renderings demonstrating the separated paths of the bike and ped, and also increased planting in trees. Before we get into the proposed actions, I just want to quickly point out the construction timeline, which will take place over 4.5 years. The early part of that construction will occur via barge from the East River, and Rockefeller will also continue to provide an 8-foot minimum path 8-foot wide path along the esplanade during its construction. So coming back to the proposed actions, a special permit pursuant to 74-682 to construct over the drive and allow for bulk modifications, an amendment to the large-scale community facility development, change in the city map to eliminate column volumes. An A application, amended application, was actually filed in December to reflect some refinements to the volumes that I'll get into. There's also a City Planning Commission certification pursuant to the 1973 agreement. So in order to build over the demapped airspace of the FDR Drive, the applicant requests a bulk modification to modify the rear yard requirement. So a 30-foot rear yard is required to be maintained from the rear lot line, which is that in black, and from the rear yard line, which is in red. The orange represents the small portion of the building, which is actually encroaching in the rear yard. This is a section of that portion that is encroaching the rear yard by 11 feet. With regard to the city map change, as stated earlier, the columns for the lab would actually come down through the FDR, thereby requiring that volumes of the space be eliminated, discontinued, closed, and conveyed. The city map would provide for volumes or sweaters for the building columns below and above grade. An amended application was filed on December 24th to reflect technical refinements to the columns, so essentially a more refined sweater for the columns. With regard to the approvals related to the 1973 agreement, the 73 agreement set forth a process to demap the columns along the FDR Drive and Esplanade, provided that the development would minimize impact to the greatest extent practicable on the Esplanade, the FDR Drive, its utilization, the visual quality of the waterfront area, and vehicular use of the FDR. Rockefeller University has conducted an environmental impact analysis and is proposing improvements to address findings related to noise, which include a sound barrier, an enhanced esplanade, and a minimum 8-foot wide access path on the esplanade during construction. Lastly, the large-scale community facility development does require updating to reflect the proposed development's increase in floor area and lot coverage, about 2 million square feet in floor area and 346,000 square feet in lot area that will be added are both within the allowable maximums. The draft environmental impact statement did identify significant adverse impacts to historic and cultural resources, shadows, and construction impacts related to noise and open space. Potential mitigation measures have been identified to these impacts and will be addressed between the draft and final stages of the environmental impact statement. So moving on to the public review, after the application was certified and referred out, the applicant, as I noted earlier, filed an amended application to make the technical refinements to the column volumes. In January 8th, 2014, the Community Board approved a resolution with conditions by a vote of 25 yes, 3 opposed, 8 abstentions, 1 not voting for cause. The Community Board's resolution reflects some items that Rockefeller has agreed to undertake, such as increasing the height of the sound barrier from 5 feet to 8 feet, the ask that the Community Board be a part of an ongoing design process of the Esplanade, an increase in the maintenance of the Esplanade from 2 to 4 years, and the provision of additional monies for further maintenance of the Esplanade. The Community Board's conditions include that the university expand its special programming to residents of the community, that the university try to make a portion of its campus open to the residents for their enjoyment, that the university study the opportunity to provide water to parts of the Esplanade not part of the project, and that the university commit to having many of the structural elements hoisted over the FDR Drive during the nighttime. The Manhattan Borough President recommended conditional approval, provided that the applicant follow through on the commitments to the community board, as I stated earlier, undertake a community design process for the Esplanade prior to city council approval, work with the city to establish an amount and mechanism for continued financial support of the improved Esplanade beyond the 4-year maintenance period, create and advertise a program for the general public during certain hours of the spring and the summer and fall. And lastly, develop a plan to create new public access areas, perhaps along its York Avenue frontage. This item's on for public hearing on Wednesday.
Thank you, Melissa. Questions? Start with Michelle, then Orlando, then Anna.
Melissa, thank you. I'm just wondering, could you show on the site plan, it seems as though Borough President Gail Brewer, got to get used to saying that, had a particular area in mind when she was talking about public area that might be made accessible to the community?
So they suggested portions of the York Avenue frontage, which today have a gate, and that perhaps the gate could be slightly relocated to create public access areas along that edge.
And are we aware of what the response from Rockefeller has been thus far to that suggestion?
They'll be able to speak to that tomorrow.
And then when do we expect the FEIS?
In 10 days prior.
10 days, okay. Thank
Orlando, and then Anna.
Melissa, first of all, thank you for setting up all these tours that unfortunately were canceled due to the weather. I just really appreciate that, so I wanted to make that.
It's not my fault. I'm the snowmaker.
You've worked very hard to try and get us involved and out there, so I appreciate that. My question was along the lines of Commissioner De La Hoz, relating to the open space and access, and mine was a little bit more specific because I noticed that you have an amphitheater east of the Welch Hall. And so I was linking that access to the amphitheater. What exactly is the use of the amphitheater and by whom?
Well, a lot of the landscaped area here, including the amenity of the amphitheater, is all entirely for the Rockefeller University campus. And this perimeter would be secure, so there would be no access between the Esplanade and this portion. And there is, a lot of sensitivity around the research, the instrumentation that's being used on the campus, and so I think that's been sort of what Rockefeller has been expressing about this, and they'll also be able to speak to the access issues tomorrow at the public hearing.
And so I guess I'll ask the question again. So the intended use of the amphitheater is only for the participants of the university?
I believe so. I mean, I think that part of the recommendations that the community board has requested in terms of additional programming for the community, I think Rockefeller will be discussing further. I know that they're bringing resources on board to help make that happen. It may or may not include that amphitheater.
Thank you.
Anna?
On the Esplanade, as you indicated, there's a statement in the environmental work in our briefing sheet that further work will be done on the Esplanade design between the
DEIS and
the preliminary environmental thing and the final thing. The plans that you showed us, does that reflect any of that additional work? And where are we in the further work on the Esplanade design? And are we going to know anything about it by the time we have to vote? I know the borough president's recommendation wanted a community participation in a process that would conclude by the time it gets to the city council.
Right.
Are we going to hear about any of that before we have to vote?
Yeah, I'd imagine so. Before the vote, I would probably bring the application back to review session and talk through any changes that may have happened with the design of the Esplanade. I think that the sort of ongoing conversations with the community about the design primarily, or for one, serve to just bring the community into the design process just to express how some of those design decisions were made. But, in terms of environmental factors, the noise barrier, which also includes, or the crash wall, which also includes the noise barrier, is a part of that, of addressing the environmental issues. And there was a request for the community board to actually raise that noise barrier to 8 feet. It's something that Rockefeller is going to commit to and is going to be reflected in the change design of the Esplanade. So I understand that there's a design meeting happening with the community this week. So, I think when we come back for successive review sessions, we'll be able to talk through what those changes are.
And then I gather there's also an issue about the extent to which Rockefeller will contribute to funding of ongoing maintenance, and they've agreed with the community to do it for, 4 years?
They extended it from 2 to 4 years.
And the borough president has asked for 8. I'm wondering if you could put that in context with other pieces of the Esplanade. Are there other places where private developers have a commitment to support the Esplanade? And how might that, obviously it's great to push for whatever the public sector can get in terms of additional support. Is that likely to happen here?
It's a good question. In terms of context, it's something we can get back to you on. Actually, I don't know specifically all the other projects, how much they've contributed to maintenance and operations beyond capital improvements, which most of them, I should mention, going back to the 80s, just dealt with actual straight, like the ramps and some building out some amenities along the Esplanade, but that was kind of it. But we can find out more specifically.
Yeah, it seems if it would be great to get additional help with the ongoing maintenance of the landscaping in particular, because I think landscaping is going to be really a nice feature here, but it needs that has an upkeep cost to it. So I'm with the borough president on requesting more.
Okay, other questions for Melissa? Angela?
I think, Melissa, I know the answer to the question, but I want to ask it anyway. The recreational center, the fitness center, the changes are going to utilize an existing footprint, correct? Doesn't require any removal of trees or any of that? The changes to the recreational center.
I'm not aware of any trees that need to be relocated.
Well,
I think you're right.
When you showed us an aerial, there were tons of trees, so I'm assuming that there. The question is.
I'll find out about the trees.
Okay.
We talked about that last time.
I suspect the applicant is in the audience, and so we'll give a description as well.
Had I not seen the aerial, I would not have asked the question. That was part of your presentation. Thank you.
Other questions for Melissa? Maria?
First of all, I'm sorry that I was not able to attend the tour. First of all, the philosophy of the Rockefeller University for these very free-flowing, sort of environment of free-flowing ideas so that the faculty can interact with one another and it's sort of open. So it's really wonderful for the academic world and important, but also sort of, I guess, puts us into conflict with an urban setting where everybody wants, more open space. And, as you walk on York Avenue, you see this beautiful campus, and you don't have access to it. So the question is, how can they manage to keep their philosophy, which is really wonderful and absolutely essential for the growth of ideas? Nevertheless, how can they really be neighbors and offer some of that beauty so that the neighbors can also appreciate it? I mean, there has to be some way that it can be done, including the amphitheater, which I think is, what a wonderful thing to have an amphitheater, right? Overlooking the East River. So I'm sure that with all the great minds at the Rockefeller University, they can come up with something.
Well, hopefully some of them will be here tomorrow, right? Okay.
Well, for sure.
Any other questions for Melissa? Okay, this is on for public hearing. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. Let's now move to item number 9, page 240, proposed zoning text amendment and certifications to facilitate, chairperson certifications to facilitate enhanced public access areas between West 31st and 33rd Streets, 9th and 10th Avenues. And our presenter is Frank. It's a Manhattan pre-hearing application, page 240.
You hear from Frank already?
Good afternoon again. This is an application by BOP West 31st Street for a zoning text amendment to the Special Hudson Yards District affecting the area known by the applicant as Manhattan West. Manhattan West is the area located in the overall Hudson Yards area, sitting basically between Moynihan Station and the larger Eastern Rail Yard site, which we've seen a variety of text amendments over the past couple of years. The area of Manhattan West was intended to be developed with predominantly commercial development, but also allowing for more limited residential and other mixed use. As part of the site itself is located in Hudson Yards Farley corridor, and this corridor not only had intent to provide opportunities for large-scale commercial development, but also to provide opportunities for expansive amounts of public access areas intended to connect the areas of Madison Square Garden, Penn Station, and Moynihan toward the west. And the block of Manhattan West and the 450 West 33rd Street building really being the linchpin of that through the development of public access areas through what would effectively be 32nd Street, or the area of 32nd Street, to provide public connections between those two areas. The site itself is divided into two sections. The eastern, let's call it 2/3, is defined as the Manhattan West area. Has a maximum FAR of 19, of which 4 could be developed as residential. And the western portion of the block is known as 450 West 33rd Street, and that could be developed up to 21.6 FAR. It's useful to show some aerials to get a sense of what this looks like today. The eastern section of the block is developed predominantly as a location for the Penn Station train tracks that head into the terminal or into the station to the east, as well as a series of parking lots on the northern and southern sections. And then 450 West 33rd Street is a large office building that sits on the western portion of the block. You can see that in aerial form here. Oh, there we go. Here's the 450 West 33rd Street building. Beyond that, you can actually see the Eastern Rail Yard, and then in the front, the beginnings of the construction of Manhattan West, which is actually the development of the deck to allow high-density construction to occur on it over time. Some site photos to get a sense of how the site sits today. One of the things that's interesting in how the design has actually been looking at this is connecting the site through the variety of grade changes that occur around it. Predominantly on the northern section, as you can see in this photo here, Dyer Avenue, which is actually known as the Lincoln Tunnel approach, is actually below 33rd Street when you're walking as a pedestrian, but on the southern section of the site at 31st Street, Dyer Avenue, which you can actually see here, actually comes to grade at 31st Street. So the grades of the site are actually changing in those ways. So the site itself in the Hudson Yards District has a series of requirements, a series of required public access areas. This is similar to the Eastern Rail Yard, where we've seen a number of other similar text amendments that defines a series of spaces that are required to be provided on the site and then has a series of requirements for each of them. On this site, the predominant space was a minimum 60-foot wide space in what would effectively be the area of 32nd Street that would connect from Moynihan Station, or future Moynihan Station, west toward the rest of Hudson Yards and the Eastern Rail Yards. 50% of the walls surrounding the space were required to be retail, and importantly, 60% of the actual space itself was required to be covered. Think of World Financial Center down in Lower Manhattan as the kind of idea of the space that the text was contemplating. In addition, there's a requirement for a public plaza at 9th and 33rd Street. a mid-block pedestrian walkway of a minimum of 20 feet that would allow one access from 33rd Street down to 31st. And then in the 450 West 33rd Street building, when significant development occurred, the requirement to effectively continue that pedestrian access from 9th Avenue all the way to 10th Avenue in the site itself. And finally, a small bridge, which the intent was then to connect the two pieces over what was to be, or what is Dyer Avenue. So since 2005, when Hudson Yards zoning went into effect, a couple things have changed on this block. First of all, BOP West 31st Street, aka Brookfield, has gained control of both the Manhattan West portion of the block, but also 450 West 33rd, and that's led to the idea of being able to kind of think of the overall block and its planning in a more comprehensive fashion. Two, looking at the constructability of what can occur on this eastern portion of the block. Two things have been figured out. One, that one can actually deck over the entirety of Dyer Avenue and allow for a kind of more than the minimum 20-foot requirement and bridge that the current text contemplated, but for a much more expansive series of public access areas in the center of the block. And two, in the front, in the central space of effectively 32nd Street, buildings, because of the tracks below, have to be more than the 60-foot distance required in the text, have to be set further away from each other because of the constructability with the deck below, with the deck and with the tracks below. So that's, I guess, the overall point is that's led to a kind of more comprehensive thinking of the site, and then given that a series of proposed zoning text changes to really update the site plan text requirements for the site to this current proposal. This is the current overall massing proposal for the site. In the front here, facing 10th Avenue, the 450 West 33rd Street building would actually be maintained, but renovated to continue to provide office space. And then 3 towers would be built on the Manhattan West site, 2 large office buildings, and a 3rd building that would be a residential building along 31st Street. To provide for this plan, a series of actions are required. The predominant one for the Commission is the zoning text amendment, which is required, as I said, to update the public access areas and a series of other requirements. I'll go through those quickly. And there's a series of other certifications that I'll just highlight also. First, the text amendment updates the required public access areas for the site. Similar to how there are requirements in the current text, it actually updates those and provides for a series of new spaces, including an art plaza on the southeast corner, expanded requirements for the central plaza, the Dyer Avenue platform, as well as new requirements for spaces that connect this Dyer Avenue platform all the way to the west on 10th Avenue. Just to give a sense of that, in the central plaza, the requirements are that the space has a series of clear path requirements, a series of planting requirements, seating requirements, and in total that the space itself actually is almost double the size that it was required to have been in the original 2005 approvals, as well as having requirements for seating that weren't included in the original text. And in addition, that space between on the 450 West 33rd portion, providing for a new connection that would be developed between the mid-block passage all the way to the west through the 450 West 33rd Street building to the intersection of 10th Avenue and 31st Street. The overall conceptual site plan. In summary, the amount of public access area on the site would increase from 49,000 square feet to approximately 92,000 square feet, effectively almost doubling the public access areas on the site and providing for much more seating, trees, and planting than the original text provided for. Second, one of the things the text also required was that as development on the block occurred, certain amounts of space be provided. And one of the things that's also been identified as more analysis of the site and construction has gone on is that original phasing plan really was unworkable. It doesn't make sense given the types of construction that would occur on these 2 large northern and southern parcels. And so the text amendment includes an updated proposal for phasing, which would set forth that when development occurs on either on the northern block or northern portion of the site, At a minimum, the entry plaza would be required to be provided at the same time. When development occurs on the southern portion of the block, at that time, the art plaza would be required to be provided at the same time. When the, let's call it residential building on the southwest is developed, the connection from West 31st Street up to the deck itself would actually be required. And in total, when more than 15 FAR is developed on the site itself, the entirety of the public access areas on the site have to be provided. Additionally, Hudson Yards has a series of special parking regulations. Parking is only permitted in Hudson Yards when a series of calculations are able to identify that parking is available to be constructed in Hudson Yards. On this site itself today, there's approximately 434 spaces, and in the future, the proposal includes a plan for 300 spaces on the block. One of the things that the text requires is that when construction is required to take place within 2 years of the floor area for those 300 spaces. However, given the size and the scale of construction on the block, that time frame is too short for development here. And so the text amendment includes that for development on this block, the certifications for parking on this site would be available for up to 6 years. Finally, for residential two-chair certifications, talking about residential use predominantly, the site is permitted to develop 4 FAR of residential use. However, it must be identified that sites of over 50,000 square feet remain available on the block for future long-term commercial development. Given the size of this site, those are easily available on it, and that's part of the certification here. Moving past the referral to the recommendations of the Community Board, Community Board 4 recommended conditional approval of the proposed application with the following conditions. First of all, Brookfield has volunteered that 20% of the buildings in the residential building that they're proposing on the site would be permanently affordable. And what the Community Board recommends is that Brookfield make that agreement in writing to the City Council, but in addition that those affordable units have the same finishes as the other market rate units in the building and also have access to the other amenities in the building itself. Second, public access area hours. The proposal allows for minimum hours of operation of the public access areas from 6 a.m. to 1 a.m., which is similar to other spaces in Hudson Yards. The Community Board recommends that these spaces be required to be open 24 hours a day. Third, in the central space on the site, there's the opportunity for an event space and pavilion. The Community Board recommends that space, if that is constructed, that seating be made available for public use on the site. Fourth, that development take into account the public streets on West 31st and West 33rd Street, and that the development on the site actually be open and inviting to those streets as well. And finally, that Brookfield continue to work with the community, and particularly on the construction task force that the Community Board has for development in this area. We haven't yet received a recommendation from the Borough President. However, we were contacted by them today that we should get a recommendation later today, and if so, we will provide that to you before the hearing tomorrow.
Okay, thank you, Frank. Questions? This is 2 on public hearing tomorrow. Questions for Frank? Anna?
Frank, one of the slides, about 6 or 7 in, you showed pedestrian passageways through and around the site.
Sure.
And it was one with all the green arrows. The one at the
this
top
one
right
here?
there, that one.
Okay.
And you show passage through, and I understand that's what is now proposed.
That's correct.
And you show a dotted green line going through 450.
Yep.
And as I recall in the Hudson Yards rezoning text, there was also to be a bridge.
Sure.
At that location across
to 10th
Hudson
Avenue.
Yards. So my question is about what the dotted line means and what's happened to the bridge.
Sure. So let's start with this site, and then we'll go to the bridge. So the Hudson Yards text laid out that this is, as we all know, it's a large existing office building, and the idea, at least at that time, was there were really two options that this text contemplates. One is that 450 West 33rd Street's demolished, and brand-new development takes place on the site, and there's requirements set forth for public access through the site then. The second is that 450 West 33rd Street is maintained and an overbuilt condition exists and a large tower is built on top of it, and a different set of requirements are set forth there. Those are maintained in this proposal, the difference being that where today Brookfield is concentrating its focus on new development on the eastern portion of the block and really looking to just renovate 450 West 33rd Street. So what the arrow effectively represents is that in the future, when either of those conditions are met, A, significant overbuild occurs, or B, 450 West 33rd Street's taken down, that's still required to occur. And then for the bridge itself, the bridge is actually a requirement of the Eastern Rail Yard site. So when development, again, similar to this, when this space is constructed, as for the requirement that it's constructed either in the overbuild or in the new development condition, the Eastern Rail Yard site is actually required to provide a bridge to connect to it. So that it's actually related on this.
Mm-hmm. All right, so in the current reality with the proposal to redevelop, not even redevelop.
Let's renovate, really.
Send 450 to the spa and make it look a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
But keep its essential core. Neither of those requirements would be triggered. So we're not looking at passage through the building or the bridge for a very long time, if ever.
That's correct.
Okay. And then one more question is about the treatments along 31st and 33rd Street. I think the community board shone a light on that. Are there any requirements in the Hudson Yards zoning for transparency, retail activity? It's got a grade change. It's a challenging situation, but what are those facades going to look like at street level?
So in the text itself, there's a requirement for sidewalk widening on 33rd Street, but that's about it. I think that, just thinking about it, the intent of the original text was really focused on that central space and getting people to the west. So the rules on 33rd and 31st are more limited. Beyond what the text requires, it's a good question to ask the applicant what they're proposing on those two sides.
Okay, I certainly will. Thanks.
Other questions for Frank? Okay, this is on for public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Now, let's go to tomorrow, February 19th, Nat Leventhal's birthday.
Thank you for telling us.
I know, I'm telling on. So we have the Bronx General Post Office Interior Landmark designation. We have the 4 bridges over the Franklin Avenue shuttle, city map amendments to codify existing conditions. We have 110 Green Street, which is a special permit to facilitate retail and gallery space. We have 688 Broadway, which is a special permit for use in bulk to facilitate a mixed-use building. We have the South Village Historic District. Staff's not aware of any conflicts with the zoning resolution, projected public improvements, or plans for the area. Identified on your calendar is 266 West Service Road. That's actually a chair certification. It does not require action by the commission. We have 228 Vineland Avenue, which is a certification for subdivision from 1 to 3 zoning lots to facilitate development of 3 two-family homes in the special South Richmond Development District. We have 207 Arbutus Avenue, which is a certification from 1 to 2 zoning lots in the special South Richmond Development District. And we have 15 Woodside Avenue, which is a renewal of previously approved authorization to facilitate a single-family home. On March 5th, we have a proposal, a zoning map amendment from R32 and C22 to C41 to facilitate a wider range of commercial uses within an existing shopping center. It's known as the Braddock Hillside rezoning proposal. We have the office space that was presented earlier by Richard for 123 Williams Street for HRA use. And we're getting ready to have our second Post-hearing follow-up for Domino Sugar, which involves proposed special permits, text change, authorizations to facilitate a mixed-use development along the East River waterfront in Brooklyn. And our presenter is Justin.
All right. Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is the post-hearing follow-up for Domino Sugar. It's in Community Board 1 in Brooklyn. As a reminder, the requested actions before the Commission are the 4 special permits to the large-scale general development, zoning text amendments, and 3 authorizations for the waterfront public access on the site. The approvals that are proposed are to modify the plan that was approved in 2010. The 2.75 million square feet development had towers that range from 300 to 340 feet along the waterfront and included a waterfront open space. The current proposal is 2.95 million square feet and provides additional open space on the site, including a newly extended River Street and a public square at the Domino Square on the corner of the site. This open space results in significantly taller buildings and a different relationship to the existing context, with buildings that range up to 435 to 535 feet. As a comparison to those 2010 approvals, we have the elevation that show the relationship to the bridge and the upland neighborhood context, with the 300 to 340 foot buildings, and this new proposal with buildings that are 435 to 535 feet. At the post-hearing, there was a request for additional views of the project. This one is of the buildings from the Williamsburg Bridge that was requested, and here we can see the approximately 310-foot tall bridge with the Site D towers that rise to 435 and 535 feet, plus an additional 30 feet for bulkhead screening. And the Site B building, the donut building, that rises to 530 feet. The void in the center of the building from different views, as you can see here, really turns more into sort of a larger volume of building. This is a review looking at the upland neighborhood context. This is on Penn Avenue, looking north toward the Williamsburg Bridge. The Site D towers are in the foreground, again 435 feet, 535 feet. The Site B building sort of in the background at 530 feet. The upland neighborhood context really is a lower scale 2 to 4 story context. This is the view of the public waterfront of the new proposed space. So this is the waterfront public access area that would be located west of River Street, looking south toward the bridge. Again, you have the Site D towers, the 435, 535 feet. In the background, obscured by a proposed artifact walk, would be the Site B building. So the program comparison for the proposal, this development is approximately 200,000 square feet larger than the 2010 plan, with over 380,000 square feet of additional commercial space, 165,000 less square feet of residential space, although the unit count is approximately the same. The affordable housing that would be required differs by the prior plan was approximately 502,000 square feet required. This plan is approximately 427,000 square feet required in order for the developments to reach their full FAR. In addition, the project does provide approximately 1.1 acres of additional open space. And this is what results in the buildings being approximately 200 feet taller than the approved plan. So this is an overview of what was presented at the last post-hearing, which is really just a side-by-side comparison of the affordable housing for the existing proposal and the current Two Trees proposal. Again, 502,000 square feet of floor area required to be affordable in order to reach the full FAR. The Two Trees proposal with the text amendment and the sort of the change in balance of the amount of commercial on the site results in 427,000 square feet of affordable. Two Trees has committed to providing 660 units of affordable housing and 500,000 square feet of affordable floor area. And this is beyond the requirements of the inclusionary housing program. So during the public review and during the public hearing and post-hearing, there have been a lot of concerns and questions about the affordable housing and the proposed text amendment. And the department has been looking at the different zoning alternatives to accomplish additional required affordable housing as a part of this plan. So this table outlines some of those zoning tools that could be used. The current, again, Two Trees proposal, which includes a text amendment to exempt the non-residential above the ground floor area, resulting in a lower affordable housing requirement. If you don't approve that plan and make the non-residential requirement consistent with the existing 2010 plan, you get approximately 470,000 square feet of required affordable floor area. In addition, there's another tool, which is to make this proposal consistent with what was done in the Greenpoint and Williamsburg rezoning, which is where we have R6 and R8 sites that are a part of one development. The entire site would need to meet the R8 district's 20% affordable housing plan. That results in an increase of affordable floor area required up to about 490,000 square feet. Additional modifications that are under consideration is to look at considering treating all portions of the large scale, including the refinery building and the refinery zoning lot, to be more uniformly treated for the purposes of inclusionary housing. This would allow for the uniform treatment of those upper floor non-residential floor area over the entire general large scale for the purposes of calculating the inclusionary housing requirements. This would result in a larger inclusionary housing requirement for the entire project. So another element that's come up since the post-hearing is the review of open space. We've circulated to you a letter from Councilmember Levin's office and a response letter from the applicant about the open space issues on the project. Generally, these letters address the quantity, the design, and the operations of the open spaces. So again, here's an overview of the site plan of the open space. The river street that was extended through the site. To the west of that is the waterfront public access area that would be a part of the waterfront authorizations that are being reviewed. In addition, there's the Domino Square and public access area in front of the refinery building that are really part of the large-scale open space approvals for the project. In total, this is about 4.8 acres of open space. So some of the approvals looked at the design of the open space and some design modifications. Part of this includes an important feature of the project, which is the artifact walk, which is essentially a sidewalk along the edge of River Street that is within the waterfront public access area, and the location of different artifacts and features found on the site into that open space plan. So to sort of walk through the design components in greater detail, this is starting at the southern end of the site adjacent to the Williamsburg Bridge. The applicant has proposed a design that looks at a lot of different programming of these open space features that in some cases result in a lower amount of planting. So for example, they have a dog run at the southern edge, and then a sort of a consolidated area of active play spaces, so bocce court, flexible field, volleyball. These areas aren't part of the sort of more passive planting that's contemplated in in the waterfront. Moving northward to, this is the refinery building to the east, a large central plaza that has seating steps in a large paved feature area, and additional sort of planting, seating, lounge areas that are divided up as different design features. Because of all of the pathways and the large area of planting and water feature, there's a greater amount of paved area in this proposal than would otherwise be required by our waterfront regulations. This is an area where there could potentially be adjustments to the design to address some of the concerns raised by the council member. Then moving to the north, there's a play area, sort of top lot feature. So again, that area is not generating a lot of planted, but there is one lawn feature at the northern end of the site that would be sort of the more passive lawn design. And again, there are opportunities for potentially consolidating and reconfiguring some of these areas and design features to provide for more planting. The next area of the open space is the public access areas that are provided within the general large-scale site plan. So this includes the Domino Square and the proposed plaza area in front of the refinery fronting onto River Street. These areas are sort of contemplated and discussed as being programmed with different uses, and the desire for paving is a part of that consideration. There are some plantings provided in the Domino Square, but these are actually raised planters with seating at the perimeter, so it's not accessible lawn or planted space. But and these squares are retail kiosks that are provided on the site. So again, these are areas where there may be a consideration in the planting that can be provided within the open space overall on the site. In terms of the uses and programming, these spaces would be governed by an M&O agreement with the Department of Parks and Recreation. So the use of those spaces would be consistent with that, but there's been a request that there be additional community input on the programming and operation of the space with additional community input. And that's something that we are working with the applicant and Department of Parks and Recreation to develop those programming and design issues and related design issues going forward. And that is...
Okay, Justin, thank you. So, obviously, there's still some time before this is voted, but we want to hear the thoughts of the commission. Why don't I start with Angela? Something tells me she might have some thoughts.
I will try to stay calm. Justin, first of all, thank you. I don't know how long you've been with the department, but this seems like induction by fire. You're wonderful. You're thorough. With regard to the open space, we just received a letter from the council member that you referred to in the response. It's very hard to read and listen, so it's very hard to address those concerns. As I said from the beginning, I think the open space is lovely. I think it's desirable. It's called for. I maintain, I mean, you talk about things being under consideration, but we don't really know what that consideration will be, and probably will not know for another 2 weeks. Would have been helpful to know today what the consideration was. And I do understand there's a new chair coming on board, so it's a little bit different. Let me start by saying again, and I know some of my colleagues agree with me, that I don't think there should be an amendment to the inclusionary housing text that reduces the number of affordable units. Let me also say, and I've said this consistently, not only in the previous rezoning in 2010 that we approved were we allowing for a lot of extra height, and at that time the community board was not happy about the height. We are now allowing for 13 stories and 2 buildings above that height with really, in my view, other than the open space, very little in return. So I just would like to see the levels of affordability. I did make a complete comparison. I'm not going to bore everyone with this. You have it, you've seen it, you know what it is. But we do know that the previous action absolutely committed to 660 affordable units, and even though the presentation says there's a commitment, the paperwork I'm reading doesn't really indicate that to me, and it doesn't give me a level of comfort. You could, my colleague, the engineer, will address some of the units, I'm sure. The configurations of the units, I have consistently said, especially if we're going to give a lot to a developer, that, and now we're talking about North Brooklyn, an area that is characterized by low income, people of color, and families, that the configurations of these apartments, in my view, must change. I don't think studios, ones and twos, is an acceptable plan. I think there have to be some larger units to accommodate those families. And I also do think, I was happy, I believe at the last time we were together, we were told that the first building would contain 500 units, half of which would be marketable at least 60% of AMI and lower, and 25% of which at 40 and lower. That makes me very happy. But I do agree, I do believe rather that the bands of affordability have to match the area where the development is being proposed. And I'll just end my comments with those observations, and I'm very passionate about this. I really do believe the design is nice. You called it the donut. I think that was a first. I don't remember referring to it as that. It's extremely tall. I also want to thank the people in the audience that were here at the hearing and are here again. I got the impression from the first briefing package that since the community board was so overwhelmingly in favor, that there was an opposition, but there is. And just about everyone who opposed did oppose the inclusionary housing text amendment, and they had other things to say which I believe are worthy of review. That being said, I just think by the time we meet again 2 weeks from now in a review session, there have to be some modifications to give me a level of comfort with what we're giving this developer. And I thank you, Justin.
Welcome. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Other thoughts on this side?
Yes. It's just something that doesn't, it's not right to cut down the volume, floor area for the affordable housing and argue that we're giving you the same number of units. You can keep doing that down to 250 square feet a unit too. It's just wrong, it's clever, but it's not smart.
Okay. Michelle? Betty, I assume you...
I'm okay for now.
Okay, all right. Michelle?
So Justin, under what's the options A through D, really, that you currently have up, D being the additional modification under consideration. So do we have a sense as of yet how many square feet floor that would require? If you do, is that still being calculated?
It's still being calculated. Brenneman can speak to it.
That's what I hear.
Exploring every option. I mean, we understand, Commissioner Cantor's comment about sort of the promise for 660 units and how does that realistically fit into whatever square footage we end up with. So we are looking at options. We are looking at how this has been handled in other projects of similar kind. We are really looking at this as a large-scale project where the refinery is a component of that larger project, and how we can work through zoning so that there is a binding commitment to a higher floor area. That's what zoning can control more than anything else. So.
And when do you believe we might have the information about how, if it were treated as a large scale, how it would work out?
We will get that to you as soon as we have some a scenario here that we can email the commission and we can discuss it at the next review session.
And have there been ongoing conversations with Two Trees about the various scenarios, or how is that happening?
Yes, there have been ongoing conversations.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. And
Betty?
There was a second piece to that about replacing with a more flexible formula for mixing the incomes. Is there any change to that, or is that still what the original proposal was?
At this point, it's still with the original proposal. We will look at the comprehensive set of changes as we look at them, which will include sort of the increase in the floor area, and we will also consider the flexibility at that point.
Okay.
Michelle?
Sorry, it's okay. So, Justin, you mentioned this, because we just received these letters, and obviously reading them while listening to you is a bit challenging. So, have you had a chance yet, if we were to take Councilmember Levin's point about the streets being used in the calculation for open space to be true, and perhaps you've already determined that it's not true, I'm not sure. How would that change the amount of additional square footage that Two Trees would have available to them for the project? Have we determined that yet? Because it's we're moving it to create the additional height, right? That's basically what's going on.
No. I think the question really is that the open space site plan that you are looking at, to the best of our knowledge, it is this site plan that has been shared with the community and with the council member. I think it's how the open space numbers have been calculated and characterized is really the issue here. So it's the same site plan that the community looked at and that Two Trees has shared with the council member. There were some minor tweaks to the sidewalk widths and things like that, nothing significant that came out of it. I think Two Trees characterized the additional square footage in open space by counting the streets and the upland connections in that number initially, for both their project and the previous project, to be fair. But because they have a longer additional street, it added more square footage to what they were calling their open space plan. So the plan hasn't really changed from what they presented.
Okay. And then minor, not minor if you're there and in need of it, but is there a public bathroom?
Yes. In this corner of the refinery building, there's a comfort station.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay, this side. Okay, I'll start with Orlando and work my way this way.
I want to touch base on the open space issue as well. I mean, I read I happened to sneak in enough reading of the Councilmember Levin's letter, and I understand that, as you have said, that part of the street bed is considered open space because that's how they're quantifying it. I think it would be helpful to try and understand what percentage of this proposal is street bed and what percentage of that proposal, is also street bed, to try and make an even comparison, because we can't do that without having knowledge of how much street bed they included. I also think that the argument that is being made by Councilmember Levin regarding the Domino Square is a valid one. While it's open space, and I understand that, I think he's calling for more greening of that space, more softscape, considering, the environmental issues we've been faced with recently. Having sort of a spongy area, to me, makes more sense along the waterfront. And I understand we have along the waterfront, but it's one block in from the waterfront. It would be a better sort of implementation for that court square, for that Domino Square.
And just to let everyone know, I know you just got the Two Trees response. We just got it an hour before you guys did, so we tried to get it to you as soon as possible. But there is a drawing at the end that sort of compares the open space numbers with the streets in it and without the streets in it. So without the streets, the difference in the two plans is an acre. With the streets, it's about 2 acres. That's the difference. That sort of is what has been going on.
Anna.
Yeah, we're in a tough spot on this application. I mean, I feel like we're playing a little bit of kabuki theater with some pretty complicated issues. First, I got to say that, the 2 additional features of this plan, the 2 new features, are reintroduction of the street grid and River Street and reconfiguration of the open space. I think that is a vastly superior plan to the one that we had in 2010. I'm not so worried about the issues that Councilmember Levin has brought forward. I think we understand streets are a component of the open space, but it's an improvement to the plan, and I'm not bothered by. I mean, this plan doesn't rise or fall because of the precise square footage, additional acre here, additional acre there. It's an overall feel to the place, and I think this plan is better. I also think the plan is better for including commercial space as one of the pieces of development. I think the notion of including having people living and working in the same area, or having people come to work in an area while others are residents or leaving to work someplace else, is a very healthy form of development. But shifting to before we leave the open space plan, Domino Square we're having to take a leap of faith on, and I hope that in your negotiations with the developer you can sort of pin down that leap of faith as much as possible. I think a lot of it will get designed over time, but our concern in the public sector has to be that it remain that there are public controls in there that will ensure that it will be excellent open space. Notwithstanding, there's always the possibility that Two Trees isn't the developer when it comes to be time to develop Domino Square. We need the assurances built into the agreements that will deliver the promises that Two Trees are making. Two Trees has an excellent public record of building this kind of space. It might not be Two Trees. So we need to figure out what are the really important pieces and be sure that they are there. I'm less troubled by the, green space versus hardscape in Domino Square. If we're talking about a big public gathering space, it doesn't always have to be green. And I'm not making those decisions. We're not making those decisions right now. So we need, is Domino Square subject to the maintenance and operation agreement with Parks, even though it's not the waterfront?
I like that.
And then I want to go, and then I have a similar sort of speech and stream of consciousness thing about affordable housing.
It's part of the large scale, so it's subject to the large scale declaration, which can include controls. In the ordinary instance, the M&O would apply to the waterfront, but it's possible that aspects or all of the M&O could be applied. In any event, there is a regime for both types of spaces. And the issue you raised about the use of the spaces is very important. I think we need to talk to the applicants more about their intentions with regard to the uses of the space from a programming perspective, and we will do that.
Okay. And I hope, David, you'll be sticking around through those negotiations.
I'll be here.
And then just shifting to affordable housing. I mean, writ large, we're being asked to change city policy with respect to the inclusionary housing bonus to incentivize the production of community facility space and commercial space. Those are both good features of this plan. But it's a different thing to say that we're going to change the way we calculate affordable housing in order to motivate production of those things. We have changed that for the production of, say, community facility space to create a public school in Riverside South. I could get my head around carving out the school calculation. I have a much harder time getting my head around carving out commercial space. And honestly, it was when the fellow from
Moses.
No, I'm not. I mentioned Moses last time. I'm still persuaded by Moses. But when Alan Washington of the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership says that the text amendment sets a good precedent for future commercial projects in Brooklyn, I said, holy crap, that's not what we're doing here.
That's right.
The commercial space is good here, but I'm not sure it has a role in our affordable housing process. So we got a letter last time that made a big argument about, and we similarly got that letter at about the same time as we got the open space letter today, and so we were all a little bit befuddled. I still am befuddled. The argument in that letter has largely to do with the role of 421A in making this project happen. And they seem to be arguing out of both sides of their mouth, saying that that the text amendment is either irrelevant or crucial. And I don't know where we come out with that. So it seems to me, my takeaway from reading this letter is that they don't need this text amendment right now. Because there are going to be so many other problems with the site if 421A goes away that, the whole thing might collapse. So why do we give them a text amendment now for something? I mean, it's Betty's line of questioning from the public hearing. Why are we doing this now against a risk? Why are we protecting them from a risk that we actually all share and should deal with then when it happens? End of my speech.
Okay. Any other questions?
If you would indulge me for one more, maybe Purnima or perhaps Justin could give us a comparison chart that shows the configurations of units then and now, in terms of 1s, 2s, and 3s, and perhaps even the affordability limits then and now. I do have my notes on 100 units set aside for the elderly, 310 at 60%. But not everyone here has reviewed every last piece of paper as I did, and I think it would be good to have it right in front of us when we are confronted with voting on something like this.
So on that, let me just step back a little and say that our zoning approvals, while they will enshrine a number, an inclusionary housing requirement as part of the zoning requirements, we don't actually approve a unit mix as part of any of our approvals. The numbers that we shared with you last time were only for Site E, and they had to do with discussions that Two Trees has been having with HPD. And it was the same situation the last go-around, where we had more definite sense of what the unit mix was going to be for Building E, or if it was called something different, it was the same, Upland Building, where there were discussions with HPD. When a developer goes to HPD to seek subsidies for affordable housing, HPD has a term sheet that has certain set of requirements that they hold the developers to. Typically, that includes at least 50% of the units as 2 bedrooms or 30% 2 bedrooms and 10% 3 bedrooms as part of their agreeing to a subsidy. The rest of the affordable housing program, the developers they don't yet know how they're developing. In this case, our understanding is most of it would be 80-20. And so far as we are aware, there isn't a requirement for a larger unit mix as part of the 80-20 or the 421A tax credits that they're seeking. What they would be required to do is that their affordable component has to reflect the market component. So in a scenario where the market component consists of smaller units, that would be the case with the affordable housing as well. And therefore, we are more comfortable talking about the total floor area that they would be required to do as affordable housing, because within that floor area you will either get larger units and fewer total units, or you will get more units if the units are smaller. So that sort of is where we would be headed.
So as you might imagine, Purnima, I thoroughly understand that. I think we all know here there's something known as public benefit.
Right.
And in 2010, I remember this well. We were quite aware of the number of affordable units that were committed to. Mm-hmm. The entity that was developing it, I believe, the reason that it wasn't developed is because they couldn't keep their commitment, otherwise they would have developed it. And at the end of the day, even though perhaps it's not in our purview to either analyze based on configurations or percentages, we knew what we were getting. We knew what we were getting, and in return what we were giving was 9 stories and 19 stories above what the waterfront zoning allows. Now we're giving 22 and 32 stories above what that zoning allows, and I think we could ask for some commitment when we're giving that. That's my position, and to me it's very important. It's very, very important. I still remember how people objected to the height then, and now look how tall it is, and for some reason that's acceptable with nothing in return, and it troubles me. It just troubles me, and it troubles me a lot, as you might imagine. So again, maybe it's not part of what we should be considering as we vote, but through the 17 years that I'm here, many people have voted based on similar considerations as to whether they would support a development or reject a development, and in some cases, based on those discussions, there were withdrawals of applications. So again, to me it's important, and I suspect it's important to some of my colleagues. Uh-oh, David's at the stage.
I think it's important to go back in time to the 2010 approval simply with respect to what you described as the commitments for 660 units and a certain mix of unit types, because that was really reflected not in the Commission's action, and I think the Commission's report was pretty clear about what it was approving and what it wasn't approving, but instead was reflected in an MOU between HPD and the then developer, which made clear that the provision of that number of units and that income and that unit mix was contingent on subsidy. So I think the record should be clear about what we're comparing here in terms of the prior and the new, and I just wanted to make that clear, and I'm glad to provide copies of the MOU if anybody wants to see it. But I think if you go back to the Commission report, we were very clear about the difference between the inclusionary housing program under zoning and the intention and desire of that developer to provide more, but that ended up being contingent pursuant to the MOU. So.
No, I understand that, and I thank you, David.
Just let me, and then I'll defer. The issue of maintenance of the open space, two trees versus parks, is that still an ongoing discussion, or has that been determined?
Right. The direction is for two trees to maintain the open space and to enter an M&O with parks for the maintenance and operation and ensuring the programming that's been discussed. But because of the platform and some of the design considerations, special features, that's been the direction.
And in terms of public access, does one or the other impact that issue at all?
No difference.
Okay. Michelle.
Thanks. This might be a question for David. Just as a point of clarification about my understanding of why the CPC proposal didn't move forward wasn't because of lack of subsidy, but for other reasons based on the partnership that happened between Isaac Catan and CPC. And I would just posit that the world we're in today, 4 years later, as it relates to the view about the relationship between subsidy and the provision of affordable housing might be more evolved, and that I think there's greater awareness that the affordable housing crisis that we have in the city is one that is a necessity that all of us as stakeholders share. And so the role of subsidy may not be as prominent today as it was 4 years ago when that MOU was put forward, although I would love to see it as a reference document. So thank you.
Okay, do we have Betty?
So as we've been thinking about this inclusionary housing text amendment, I keep thinking about the testimony at the public hearing, but also referring back to a letter from Two Trees of January 30th. I just want to read a sentence here. Quote, while we could have created separate buildings for the office and community facility uses on separate zoning lots, and therefore not had any obligation to provide affordable housing with respect to these areas, we chose to integrate those uses in mixed-use buildings that contribute to a better overall site plan, end quote. So I agree with Anna that there are improvements to the site plan from the 2010 proposal, but I keep thinking back to Jed Valentis' testimony that this is part of their overall development and investment strategy. I think back to what Moses Gates said, and this is a market-based decision. So I don't see that justifies additional public benefit or modifying the amendment language, and certainly not sort of speculating on what might happen with 421A down the road. The City Planning Commission will still be here to think about those things for this applicant or other applicants. So I look forward to what the department comes up with in the various options and considerations, and sort of very open to what that might be.
Okay, Erwin?
Yeah, I have a question on that slide up on the top. Under the updated site E, the left-hand side, you say 327 units, 949 feet average. On the right side, it says 244 units, 781 average, 83 fewer than 2010. How'd you get the 83?
So there is a comparison.
Is that 83 units less?
Units,
oh, okay.
yes,
I thought it was
yes.
83 square feet. Oh,
No.
Okay.
Units, sorry. It's units. And it's because we had information for Site E for the 2010 plan. We didn't have everything, but we did know the numbers for Site E.
No,
So
I
this
thought
is
the
the
83
only.
was square foot. I'm sorry.
Right, sorry.
Okay, so we're voting this March 5th,
March 5th.
and our review session will be March 3rd, and that's when we will have some concrete recommendations, right, emanating from the department. Right? Right.
Yes.
Okay.
We ran out of
I think that's happening, yeah. Thank you.
So in addition to Domino, we have the 88th Precinct Station House landmark and the other ones that were described earlier. And now we will have our first post-hearing follow-up for 606 West 57th Street, which involves a zoning map and text amendments, as well as special permits and authorization to facilitate mixed-use buildings.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This concerns. Sure.
Okay. Now, Carolina.
All right. So this concerns 606 West 57th Street, an application by TF Cornerstone. A public hearing was held on January 22nd. Again, just to refresh the Commission, the applicant proposes a building of 450 feet or 42 stories, up to 1.2 million gross square feet floor area to include 1,189 units of housing, including up to 20% of floor area, or roughly 237 affordable units, 42,000 square feet of non-residential use on the ground floor, 500 public parking spaces. The actions that are being sought are a rezoning from M15 to M23 and M15 and M23 to C47, including several text amendments, inclusionary housing designation, the modification of the inclusionary housing structure to allow up to 4 FAR of non-residential floor area without increasing the 20% affordable housing requirement, and to allow vehicle preparation repair accessory to an automobile showroom. A special permit is also included to allow up to 500 public parking spaces and an authorization to extend a curb cut on West 57th Street. Since the hearing was held on January 22nd, the Commission received several items of correspondence. Most recently, a letter from Reade Frank, counsel to the applicant, dated February 14th. So I'll go through some of the clarifications in that letter as they relate to comments that were made at the hearing on the 22nd. With regard to what drives some of the affordable housing requirements,
In terms of quantity of affordable housing, there were questions with regards to floor area versus numbers of units per zoning, the inclusionary housing program. 20% of floor area must be affordable. The applicant will also be using 80/20 tax-exempt bonds and 421A abatements, which requires 20% of units. So the applicant's going to be meeting both requirements in terms of 20% of floor area and 20% of units. In terms of income levels, inclusionary housing generally requires that low income meet 80% of AMI. 80/20 requires 40 to 50% of AMI. Therefore, the applicant is going to meet the 40 to 50% level of affordability. With regard to unit sizes, both inclusionary housing and the public financing discussed require that affordable units mirror market units in size. The applicant currently anticipates 40% of units are going to be 2 bedrooms, 2 or 3 bedrooms. And again, they need to reflect one another, mirror one another for both market and affordable units. In terms of the treatment of non-residential floor area, again, the applicant is proposing a text amendment to exclude up to 4 FAR of non-residential uses from the affordable housing calculation. Just to clarify, all inclusionary housing designated areas in New York City exclude ground floor non-residential floor area from the base for calculating the amount of affordable floor area. This is also true in the special Clinton district, just to make clear. The applicant in the letter explains the need for this text amendment, where ground floor rents are relatively lower than residential rents. There's an incentive to include residential, as much residential as possible. This stretch of West 57th Street, the applicant believes, should be activated with retail space. So the applicant is proposing to extend the ground floor provision to upper floors to allow for a potential second floor of commercial space. Again, the applicant contemplates roughly an additional 42,000 square feet on the second floor. So as part of the formal application, the applicant proposes 42,000 square feet on the ground floor of commercial or community facility, and additionally the applicant is contemplating additional 42,000 on the second floor. However, the applicant has not fully programmed the space, and a tenant hasn't been identified for this space. I can pause there if the commission has any questions. I know that that's a mouthful.
Okay. Michelle?
So based on our just previous conversation, it seems that we would question the request to exclude the commercial space above the ground floor. Is that true?
Again, the applicant hasn't fully programmed that space. It's something that I believe that the applicant represented during the public hearing, that there were tenants, including an automobile showroom or a piano showroom. The applicant didn't want to use the entirety of the 57th Street frontage for a single retail space, and therefore contemplated using a portion on 57th Street on the ground floor and a portion above. But again, that hasn't been finalized.
Okay, while you're thinking about the other one, Anna?
Well, just to cut to the chase on this one, I would be in favor of a modification of this text that would allow community facility space on the second floor to not count. I'm not in support of commercial space above the ground floor.
Okay, any other thoughts? And then we'll let Carolina continue. Why don't you continue?
Okay, sure. So again, in the letter dated the 14th, with regard to parking, the applicant again is proposing a parking garage of up to 500 spaces to replace a 1,000-space garage, as well as provide parking for users generated by the development itself. The commission, the department continue to get comments with regard to the parking proposal, including the crowded letter that was received on February 13th and included in the commission's package. All of these comments are being very carefully reviewed, and the applicant will provide a comprehensive response to the commission in time for the next review session. With regard to environmental impact, similarly, comments are being reviewed and are being evaluated and will be addressed in the final environmental impact statement. With regard to labor relation concerns that were raised, again, beyond the Commission's purview, but the applicant did provide a letter that it sent to 32BJ dated January 16th, which was also included in the Commission's package. Additionally, there were letters from the applicant's counsel dated January 29th and February 6th proposing a text amendment for a hotel special permit to be included in the current application. To make clear to the Commission, this text amendment has not been filed. This proposal to include such a text amendment was received after the Commission's public hearing. This has not been discussed publicly. It was not discussed at the Commission's hearing on the 22nd. Right now, there is no clear use of this text in the application as proposed. There is no hotel programmed for this space. Hasn't been discussed. Is not part of the formal application. And staff is evaluating the implications of this text and is in communication with the applicant.
So on the one hand, it's premature because they haven't actually filed for this text change. And then there's a question of whether or not we would have sufficient time in the remaining time to thoroughly vet that particular text amendment proposal, right? I would think.
That's right. The Commission's vote is currently scheduled for March 17th.
Okay. So we'll have to wait and see if they formally introduce it, and then we'll respond to it then. Right? Yes.
As you're considering this, I assume I would encourage you to take a look at previous communications from Community Board 4 about hotels in this area, independent of the labor aspects of this proposal. This is a community that has been very concerned about sort of the transient use and pedestrian traffic and loud party noise that hotels bring to this stretch. And I'd point out that the site where a hotel could be built, or at least that the environmental study considers that it could be built, is immediately across the street from a very large and very active residential building, and across another street from Terminal 5, which is a large concert venue, and before that was a notorious nightclub. So I can imagine that a hotel use at the location is going to be quite problematic.
Okay.
Appreciate your comments, Commissioner.
Carolina, could you just, and I think we addressed this earlier, but the memo from Crowded in which they argue at length about the zoning recommendation, our prior zoning determinations, the site, the dirt site, the C47, C2, C62 split
Right.
versus this one, which is entirely C47. Could you address that?
Sure. The department has begun to look at the comments made by Crowded with regards to the proposed density on the site. The entire site is proposed to be zoned to a C47. Crowded points to Riverside Center zoning designation as well as the Durst project across the street, that it was a split C47, C62. The Crowded letter looks at blocks in their entirety when calculating the applicable FAR, whereas it looks at the TF Cornerstone site in this project in terms of just the segment of the block. This block also includes a sanitation garage, which is built at 2.87 FAR, and if taken in its entirety, although we need to finalize this, if taken in its entirety is roughly around a total built FAR of 8, which again is comparable to the entire blocks that Crowded discusses in its letter. Again, the context here is again slightly different. It abuts other manufacturing districts. There's manufacturing districts to the south. The Crowded letter again makes an argument around very densely residential areas. Riverside Center is of course a large-scale plan, which comes with a separate set of considerations. So those are our initial thoughts with regards to that comment.
Thank you.
pretty impressive that she was able to answer that like that.
She's been considering it.
3-day weekend.
3-day unweekend.
Well, they argue it very stringently, so I thought we ought to hear from Carolina on that. Okay. So this is voted on the...
Another month, but we'll
Another
come
month.
back again in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
With, based on-
17th, is it?
Yes.
Okay.
So based on the comments made by the commission today, thank you so much for helping to guide our response.
All right. So, anything else?
Oh, no.
Oh. Okay. So the meeting is adjourned.
Tomorrow?
See you tomorrow.
See everyone.
Too long tomorrow.
Noon?
A couple hours.
Don't go to Florida.
No, it's Thursday.